We've covered a lot of franchises on this channel, and while I do tend to get my ass handed to me during them, I wouldn't go so far as to call any of them overly challenging.
Stop the cap!
That said, in an attempt to touch base with my masochistic side once again, I was reminded of a faint memory that had been locked away for years, and let's just say, there was a very good reason for that. With the gods of Olympus looking down on us, I was going to attempt something I could never achieve as a kid. Now, before anyone starts thinking that this might be a good video, I'm going to have to disappoint a few of you and mention that this first part will only cover the first 3 Greek games. While I did want to include all 6 Greek games in one video, the damage these games had done to my rectum had become far too severe to ignore. Alas, while making this video, I have received proper treatment and have gotten back to the arse blasting in the background. That said, as I've done with every other video in this series, I documented and noted down every single death I experienced while playing through each of these games, and using them, we'll hopefully be able to determine which Greek God of War game is the hardest to complete on God mode.
The gods of Olympus have abandoned me.
Now, ironically enough, God of War starts with Kratos mimicking my exact thoughts while attempting this challenge. Understanding that killing off the main protagonist within the first few minutes would make for a shite game, we instead travel 3 weeks back into the past, where we appear to have crashed our ship straight into this rock face. As awkward as this was, the real concern was that our whole crew had seemingly died on impact, and in their place lurked their undead counterparts. Furious at their shitty excuse for a captain, they wasted no time railing us with their nuclear damage. Safe to say, this was not a great start.
Well, duh.
I mean, we're literally on the first fucking screen of enemies. Like, you couldn't get more shit. If I didn't know what I was getting myself into before, I certainly did now. For the 13.5 people that haven't played a God of War game, God mode is a difficulty option that's unlocked by completing the game on another difficulty first. And while that may be somewhat annoying, it is very much intended. As you'll come to see in this video, this mode is absolutely brutal. It's unforgiving, and just feels straight up unfair at certain points. It'll require us to completely change up our strategies, use our own cheap tactics, and most importantly, bend over constantly as we'll be getting absolutely f***ed. Now, just to help put things into perspective, apart from the enemies being far more aggressive, they also deal 5 times the damage, while our damage has been cut in half. Not only that, but red and blue orbs, which represent our currency and magic, also drop at a significantly lower rate. Yet as daunting as all of that sounds, none of it would matter if we couldn't even get past the opening screen. Due to the sheer number of enemies on screen, spam attacking our way through them wasn't going to work, meaning we were already looking to abuse an overpowered mechanic: grabbing. By pressing the circle button on an enemy, we're able to personally clap their cheeks, and as intimate as that is, we also gain access to an incredibly strong AoE attack where we launch our victim at other enemies. The best part though is that we get iframes during this whole animation, meaning we're entirely invulnerable to other sources of damage. Using this strategy, we're able to fight off the initial horde of undead crewmates before stumbling across the first Hydra head. Don't let that health bar fool you. This is a glorified mini-boss at best. Every single one of his attacks can be blocked, and if you're even remotely skilled at this game, you'll be able to defeat him without being hit a single time. Either way, after quick timing our way through a stellar sequence that does not in any way reflect our actual gameplay ability, we tiptoe across some beams, fight off Dracula's disowned offspring, and once again face off against a Hydra head whose jaw strength is so pathetic, we're able to shoulder press our way out of it. By some miracle, it would seem that some of our crew had survived the crash. Having witnessed the annihilation of another crew member, I made sure to tank an arrow off rip just to prove that we were indeed built different. Now, ranged enemies for the most part will always belong to the cancer category on enemy tier list, and that doesn't really change here. In fact, if played as intended, this section could be rather irksome, as it sees us kicking a box towards the other side in hopes of climbing up the nets here. That said, because we're playing the PS3 remaster, we don't have to do any of that lame shit, and instead can launch ourselves up before attacking mid-air to reset our position, allowing us to reach the ledge with a second jump. Having avenged our crewmates, I sought to get a clearer picture on this whole situation, which saw us climbing the ship's mast to get a better vantage point. Unbeknownst to us though, Kratos had apparently hidden chocolate inside of his sandals, as we were almost immediately swarmed by cocoa addicts. This paired with my inability to hit the circle button mean we'd have to watch as Kratos got brutally castrated from below. With my IQ fighting with the temperature of absolute zero, I couldn't wrap my head around how to deal with these blatant chocolate thieves. So instead, I employed a strategy so brain dead that I'm surprised it even worked. Yeah, so I jumped past them. What, you're gonna sue me? To add to the surprise, I didn't actually think these guys would follow me all the way up here, so I then had to spend another few minutes camping the top while I spotted them down over and over again. Alas, we collected our first Gorgon Eye, obtained our first power in Poseidon's Rage, and looked to face off against the first major boss of the game. Now, similar to the small mini-bosses we'd faced so far, but these two smaller heads on the ship deck were extremely easy to deal with. Their attacks are all blockable, meaning it was only a matter of time before we'd skewered both of them. All that remained was the big mama head, and boy oh boy was she easy.
It's been a week.
Okay, dumb deaths aside, the Hydra is by far the easiest boss in the entire game. That said, she does deal immense damage with her bites, which cannot be blocked. You can iframe these attacks with Poseidon's Rage, or you can attempt to use the less than ideal rolling mechanic, which only gives you iframes on the initial roll and not the recovery animation. Regardless, after skewering our third Hydra head, we look to enter deep into her throat. Wait, but we find another guy already penetrating it. God, I hope no kids watch these videos. After watching him struggle for a good few seconds, we look to help him up, only to realize he hasn't brushed his teeth in what smelt like months. Considering his wife was a dentist, Kratos took this as an inexcusable offense, meaning this guy was completely fucked. With the captain's key in our clutches, we made our way back to the ship deck, where we somehow one-hit every enemy during this unrealistic cutscene. With another ship to crash under our command, we set sail for Athens, only to be halted by the biggest roadblock so far. Look guys, I'm just gonna have to censor this shit. If you want to see it, just watch a long play or something. To this day, I have no idea why the developers included this 4-hour minigame, but alas, our fun had to come to an end as we docked at the gates of Athens. Unfortunately, it seems the girls weren't too impressed with our performance as they purposefully left us one orb short of a weapon upgrade. With our self-esteem well and truly obliterated, we limped our way through the docks of Athens as we faced off against some rather flexible enemies. Unfortunately for these gymnast wannabes, their flashy jumps make it much easier to parry their attacks, and before long, we'd collected our first Phoenix Feather and made ourselves known to the Minotaurs. As intimidating as these Minotaurs were, they're actually one of the easiest enemy types in the entire game. Not only can their attacks be blocked in melee range, but executing them always results in health drops, which will become increasingly useful the further in we get. That said, the unblockable attacks were starting to bear their fangs as we're introduced to my sister. Thankfully, she's always been on the slower end, and that goes for her attacks as well. Now, while I had gotten the better of both the Minotaurs and my sister, the Medusa fight was a different story. Her counterattacks after dodging were so goddamn fast that I couldn't possibly react in time in the first few attempts I had. It didn't help that her nails hadn't been cut in months as they shaved off more than half my health bar with each attack.
Holy, look at all this damage!
We did eventually clear this room out, which granted us access to our second power, which I hardly ever used. After that admittedly embarrassing ass clapping, we clear out some Minotaurs, stumble across my most recent subscriber, and launch an arrow into this wall, revealing a few extra chests. As I had stated before, enemies and chests supply us with significantly less red orbs in God mode, meaning we'll need to open as many chests as possible if we were to have any hope of leveling our weapons and magic. As we looked for another route through the gates of Athens, I once again forgot about the circle button as I edged myself towards a permanent diagnosis of carpal tunnel. Worse yet, but the sheer number of enemies were really starting to wear me down, to the point where I was getting shit on by the most basic of enemies. After another pathetic display where I baited out these dumbasses on the rope, we get gangbanged in a hallway before finally laying eyes on our arch nemesis. Now, as much as Kratos hates Ares, I hate Cyclone of Chaos even more, which is a move that you unlock when leveling the Blades of Chaos to level 3. This attack cannot be cancelled into a block, which is something I learnt the hard way. This street in particular had quite the collection of tough enemies. You've got the Gorgons, the Archers, and the toughest of all, these stone blockades, which I didn't realize you could destroy. My stupidity didn't stop there, however, as moments later I'd find myself trying to block a Cyclops attack. Thankfully, I was surrounded by like-minded idiots who'd do everything but run to safety. It was also around this point where we collected our first set of Gorgon Eyes. This meant we'd be able to tank a whopping 3 hits before dying, instead of the usual 2. Yeah, Things couldn't be more bleak. Regardless, I thought I'd been playing decently well so far, although that sentiment wasn't shared by everyone, as the only other mortal left alive would rather throw herself off this balcony than continue to watch my plays.
Keep away!
This was no time for a shattered ego, however, as we were about to stumble across our first real roadblock. See, upon reaching the rooftops of Athens, we're introduced to the wraiths in quite the spectacular fashion. By themselves, these guys aren't too bad, as we're able to block all of their attacks. That said, these guys are extremely codependent, as they're never fucking alone. Whether it's archers, legionnaires, or even my sister, these assholes are certified pussies who need backup at all times. The upper floor in particular may as well have been a torture chamber with how AIDS it was. Having to block the wraiths attacks while rolling the Cyclops attacks was an almost impossible task. I mean, these deaths were so brutal that it almost felt personal in some regards. Even when I finally managed to get one Cyclops down, my confidence was immediately obliterated as I watched the game shit another one out from its non-existent asshole. It took everything I had to complete this section, and what do we get as a reward? The worst god power in the entire game. You'd think Zeus's famous lightning bolts would instantly obliterate these flimsy archers, yet it takes 2 fucking strikes to take down each one. In fact, the only time this power was ever useful was when I had to use it to annihilate an innocent father of 3. Having established that we are by no means an honourable person, I made sure to follow in Ares' footsteps as I destroyed every last bit of Athens from the inside out. The truth is, we couldn't give a shit about Athens. If it meant more red orbs for us, then we'd obliterate the entire city ourselves. That said, there was something we desired far more than a few red orbs, and to achieve it, we'd need the help of a particular oracle.
Kratos!
Oh, I gotta censor again. Now, before anyone starts to assume our intentions with this scantily clad oracle, I can assure you we weren't looking for anything raunchy, although her constant capture did make things hard for us, in more ways than one.
What do you mean by that?
The harpies hauling her had also apparently learned how to turn themselves into unblockable nukes, which was less than ideal. The good news is that juggling gorgons seemed to deal cleave damage to whatever was close by, somehow. Having dealt with the threat, we're approached by the local homeless man who makes quite the bold statement.
And when all appears to be lost, Kratos, I will be there to help.
Okay.
Now, ignoring the fact that he's not even digging in the same hole he was at the start, we grab our second health upgrade, deal with a few more harpies, and throw our way through the hallways of this temple. Eventually, we stumble across the oracle who's been hung out to dry by the harpies, and after a short display of our parkouring skills, we're told that what we seek hides itself over in Turkey, locked away inside Pandora's box. To reach this desert, however, we first have to waste away in the sewers of Athens, which just so happens to be the hotspot for every enemy type known to man. I mean, just look at what the fuck we're dealing with here. Thank god there's a few minotaurs here, as I'd well and truly be fucked without the green orbs that they drop. Upon reaching the Desert of Lost Souls, we learn of our bored brethren, Kronos, who's apparently been searching for Pandora's box this whole time. Who's gonna tell him? Reaching Kronos is a challenge in itself, however, as it requires us to seek out and destroy the 3 sirens plaguing the desert with their tone-deaf singing. Now, you'd think it'd be a simple task to listen out for some dogshit vocals, but amongst these shifting sands, there was another peculiar sound that caught our attention. Having fallen for the god of moaning's taunt, we do eventually locate our first siren. These enemies are not only annoying in game, but they're even worse to deal with in my editing software. Their quick attacks and nimble movements make them quite irritating on their own, so it's a blessing they're never paired up with other enemy types.
2 seconds later.
This is fucking bullshit.
With her simp army summoned to her side, I felt inclined to spam magic until we got her down. Our foreplay was so rough though, that it caused her soul to leave her body, opening the pathway to our one true love, a save point. With the desert of STDs well and truly behind us, we mimic Moses as we blow our load straight through this horn, parting the sandy seas in half. This then leads us to a second horn, which is guarded by... Oh, for fuck's sake. Nah, I'm not including this shit. I can't be fuck censoring it. Moving along, we blew our second load, which in turn attracted the attention of Kronos, and while we did spend the next 3 days climbing his rock-hard body, it was all worth it as we finally laid eyes on Pandora's temple. What wasn't appreciated, however, was getting our shit kicked in immediately by these Cyclopses. Not only are these guys tankier than their naked counterparts, but they supposedly got a 50 cal sniper rifle hidden in each of their bone clubs. Thankfully, there are health chests placed around this area, giving us more than enough power to deal with these horny bastards. Alas, having met the residential housekeeper who somehow got more hair on his undead head than we do, we venture forth into the first of Pandora's bewildering rings. Pandora's lower section is split up into 3 main challenges, the first of which being the Challenge of Atlas, which certainly wasn't lying in its name. It didn't help that the gods continued to mock us though, as just before entering this challenge, we're given the Blade of Artemis, which as a weapon was about as useful as a sewage-filled filtration system. Fighting our way through the countless enemies had left us on dangerously low HP, and as you can imagine, it didn't take long for us to be greeted by that majestic death screen. The more concerning matter, however, was our HP total the moment we loaded back in. With our HP bar on permanent life support, we'd have to play this perfectly. Safe to say, I did not play any of this perfectly. Honestly though, these arseholes have the most cheap get up attack where they spin around like they're some kind of ballerina. This attack is so quick that it's almost impossible to react to, and given the fact that there were about 17,000 of these bastards, I was becoming best friends with the death screen. Worse yet, but the second shield we have to collect requires us to climb our way across a rope while we're swarmed by more undead fanboys. The sheer number of enemies on the rope make it physically impossible to cut them all down, meaning we'd have to employ a rather flashy strategy instead. While on the rope, we're able to do a heavy attack as well as a quick attack, where Kratos kicks to the side. This attack might not do as much damage, but it does stun enemies, meaning we're able to cover both sides by quickly alternating our kicks. Having collected both shields, we make our way to another climbing section where I once again abuse the fuck out of this square button. From here, we cosplayed Zeus, grabbed the handle of Atlas, and perfectly weaved our way through this room of buzzsaws before undoing any impressive feats with this brain-dead play.
You're a donut! You're so stupid!
We're then able to shove the handle straight up Atlas's ass, causing him to throw this massive boulder straight through this door, granting us access to Pandora's box.
What the hell is even that?
Either way, with another skull added to our collection, we're hit with another flashback which exposes the fact that we got our shit kicked in by a bunch of homeless men. Embarrassed, we looked to seek out some animal-assisted therapy, although it soon became clear that we'd fallen for one of the nastiest scams to ever exist.
That's the cutest fucking thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
Dealing with one of these Cerberus breeders is already bad enough, but these guys will constantly shit out their babies who all have the possibility of turning into breeders themselves. That said, I did learn 2 very important things about these guys. 1. They're extremely easy to outrange, meaning once you've decimated their offspring, it's a simple task to whittle them down. On the contrary though, they most definitely outrange any potential grab attacks that we have. Having engaged in a colossal amount of animal cruelty, I had hoped we'd been through the worst of things. This hope, however, was quickly shattered as the very next corner featured a massive block that did everything but block the onslaught of arrows flying towards us. I'm sorry, what? What's the point of this block? It doesn't even block any of the fucking arrows. This paired with another checkpoint instance of negative HP had quickly turned the challenge of Poseidon into the challenge of bullshit as I watched Kratos get fucked over and over again. On a positive note, I managed to grab our second muse key here, which we'll be using to unlock an integral room later on. It's just a shame that getting to said room requires us to push this innocent soul up a massive ramp as we're getting anally impaled by these Legionnaire captains. Despite supposedly being the highest rank of Legionnaire, this didn't seem to matter as there were like a billion of these guys. After donating a few more deaths to the death counter, we did eventually torch this innocent soul, granting us access to Poseidon's trident, and more importantly, the ability to breathe underwater. Now, unlike the majority of retro games, God of War's underwater sections are extremely relaxing as there's no enemies present whatsoever. To counteract this though, Santa Monica made sure to double the number of enemies anytime we were out of the water. Jesus, I can't even move. I don't even want to mention how many times I died in this one particular room. In fact, I think I'd rather take a shotgun blast to the nuts than relive this torture chamber disguised as a petting zoo. Alas, our nutsack remained intact as we ventured forth into the worst challenge yet. Yes, it gets worse. In fact, the challenge of Hades wastes no time, immediately injecting our cerebral cortex with AIDS as we're forced to fight off a group of never-ending centaurs. What makes this part so goddamn annoying is not the enemies themselves, but the fact that we have to kill them while standing inside these pentagram circles. The problem, however, is that all of their goddamn attacks push you out of this circle, and even our very own grab attack throws them away from the circle. The good news is I was able to rekindle my love with the death screen, as I got pummeled over and over again. To clear this absolute shit show, we'd have to implement our own brain-dead strategy, and thankfully enough, there was one that worked extremely well in this room. See, jumping into this pool of virgin blood causes all of these centaurs to de-aggro. Using this to our advantage, we're able to jump in and out while slowly dealing chip damage along the way. Eventually, we're able to whittle them down, earning us a place in Hades' Hallway of Fame. The remaining sections of this challenge weren't nearly as bad. The maze was a breeze, the life-threatening Circus Edition couldn't have gone better, and the flaming balls were pretty easy as well. The ultimate test, however, saw us facing off against an undead Minotaur who'd spent his whole life working towards the legendary tier armor he was wearing. Unfortunately for him though, technology's come a long way since his death, as we're able to slowly shatter that legendary tier armor with the help of a basic ass log launcher. That said, this fight is still extremely long, featuring multiple phases, most of which saw us standing to his left. See, this guy had been dead for so long that his left eye had completely decayed, meaning if we stood in his blind spot, he'd be forced to use the same move over and over again. That said, any attempt at finding this guy on the ground would immediately fast track our name to the top of the Darwin Awards. You'd think I'd learnt my lesson, but time and time again, I'd fuck up these Joy-Con QTEs only to watch in horror as Kratos was viciously ravaged to death. It did take a few attempts, but we put this poor Minotaur out of his eternal misery as we pinned his sorry ass to the door behind him. Considering we'd just completed the final challenge, it was only right that we'd be rewarded with Pandora's box. No, not this shit again. Having fallen for the same shit twice, we waddled our way towards the Muse door in the hopes of recollecting ourselves. This secret room not only contains our final health and magic upgrades, but it also has a buttload of red orbs, which helped immensely in upgrading the army of Hades' power. We'll be abusing the fuck out of this power during the final boss, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. For now, we align the rings of Pandora, ultimately granting us access to the upper levels of the temple. Now, while this may sound like some good progress, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. In fact, the very first enemy we're introduced to up here is arguably one of the toughest enemies in the entire franchise. Satyrs are like flying roaches. They're agile, unpredictable, and despite looking flimsy, they're able to take an unbelievable amount of damage. In one-on-one encounters, these are some of the best enemies to face, but when they're paired with literally anything else, you might as well put the lube in the bag. I hadn't realized it at the time, but there was definitely some truth to the naming convention of this area. Oh my fuck, this shit is driving me fucking insane, I swear. That said, these satyrs had one big weakness: ledges. For how agile they are, their inability to drop down a single ledge meant we could play like absolute pussies as we knocked them down one by one from below. Unfortunately, this pathetic feeling reminded Kratos of his biggest regret, in which he annihilated his own family under the promise that Ares would help get him a hair transplant. If you couldn't tell, Ares had fooled us, and the subsequent betrayal that we felt was the very reason we'd been seeking out Pandora's box for revenge. Getting fucked by 18 Cerberus breeders wasn't going to stop us. We were going to obtain Pandora's box even if it meant adding a million more deaths to this goddamn counter. Following another instance of spacing abuse, we add one final skull to our collection before coming across the final roadblock to Pandora's box. I present to you the world's most effective treadmill, where you're constantly nuked by dive-bombing harpies and one slip equals instant death. Luckily for us, we'd been leveling the army of Hades power, which is extremely overpowered in situations where there are multiple enemies. Not only does it cause them to flinch, it also does considerable damage, meaning we can focus on the most important aspects, like hitting our 5-kilometer run PB.
What?
Impressed with our running style, the gods present us with Pandora's box, but there was just one problem. Apparently we had to push this box all the way back to fucking Athens. Yeah, no chance that's happening. And to make sure of that, Ares' class changes into the god of javelins as he launches a pillar across the galaxy, nailing us straight through the heart, ending the run instantly. Or so I thought. In reality, we'd just been sent on a short vacation to the underworld, which was apparently made up entirely of a few platforms and some rotating spiked logs. We get rid of old stink breath again before perfectly platforming through this area. The underworld brings with it stronger variants of the enemies we'd been facing so far, and while we're able to get away with some ledge shenanigans once again, the final test sees us facing off against a seemingly endless number of Hades satyrs. This section, more than any other, had made me feel completely hopeless. As I said before, dealing with satyrs one-on-one isn't too bad, but when there's two of them, it just feels like you're constantly getting clapped the moment you drop your block. They remained the only enemy type in the entire game where I had no idea what their attack patterns looked like at this point. Anytime I'd even attempt to study their movements, I'd instantly be sent to the death screen. I died so many fucking times here, more times than I'd ever like to admit. So let's just put it this way, we'd spent so much time dying here that the local homeless man above had somehow managed to dig a hole straight down into this hellhole with nothing but a shovel. This was no time to be impressed, however, as we had more pressing matters to attend to, namely the annihilation of a certain individual. Yeah, that's right. That's what she gets for wasting my time having a censor her. With our main target bleeding out, we shifted our focus to yet another annoyance, the reigning Olympic champion for Javelin. By some miracle, our cheap impersonation of Zeus had stun-locked Ares for a good few hours, giving us enough time to climb our way down to Pandora's box and even undergo some costly limb extension surgery. Threatened by our rapid height increase, Ares promptly shits himself, only to then gaslight everyone into thinking this was all a part of his plan as he starts using these shit-covered claws as weapons. Thus begins what I'd consider to be the most frustrating and challenging boss I've fought in years. The fight against Ares is split up into 3 main phases, the first of which sees us facing off against him in a one-on-one battle where we have access to all our weapons and magic. This phase is without a doubt the easiest, and while he does do immense damage with his attacks, the large majority of them can be blocked completely. That said, it did take me a good few tries to learn his attack patterns, and more importantly, we need to make sure to end this phase with at least 80% of our magic gauge filled. If nothing else, trust me on this one. Going into that second phase with any less will only make you want to join Kratos in that freefall from the start of the game. Now you're probably wondering, what's so bad about this second phase? And my response to that is, what's good about it? I don't think I've come across another boss fight in recent years that stuffs your arsehole with as much bullshit as this one does. The phase revolves around us protecting our family, the same family, might I remind you, that we obliterated with our own hands. Ares had apparently loved watching that incident take place, as he spawns in countless goofball clones of us who will hone in on said family, ripping them to shreds in a matter of seconds. Thank God we can hug our family in the middle of this clusterfuck of a fight to heal them. What's that? It siphons our own HP to do so? Well, isn't that fucking great? These motherfuckers will also use any opportunity to mount your ass, which is pretty much an instant loss. Just the sheer number of clones alone means there's no way you're randomly fighting your way through this. Instead, we'll have to focus on juggling whole groups of enemies, all while making sure we save our magic for tight situations. Rage of the Gods is also extremely important, as it allows us to use our magic infinitely and even stack them on top of each other. This fight required absolute perfection, to the point where I died again and again and again. There were even several points where I questioned if I'd realistically be able to complete this fight. That's just how hopeless I felt. But as a famous person once said, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Which has absolutely no relevance to this situation at all, as we'd been killed over 100 times by this point. For all intents and purposes, my mental state was in the bin, but I was determined to stick with it, and after an unbelievably close attempt, I had finally managed to pass phase 2. The third phase in comparison is a complete joke. As I was saying, the third phase is complete fucking bullshit. Yeah, so what I'm trying to say is, what the fuck is going on? In all seriousness though, the third phase requires a lot of dodging and tactical play. Outside of this one fire palm attack which we can't block, the rest of his attacks are relatively easy to deal with. Not only that, but following a good few of them, he'll suffer from constipation, causing him to yell out in frustration. This is our opportunity to get into a bit of a clash with him, resulting in big damage should we win it. I just knew in my heart that I was getting closer. It wouldn't be long before I'd conquered the God of War. Wait, what? No. Are you This is a piece of This game's Oh, you can't be Bro, it took me 2 hours. I can't possibly put into words just how infuriating this moment was. After spending over an hour fighting my way through a second phase, I'd have to do it all over again. The good news is that this crash had angered me so much that I couldn't bring myself to play the game for the rest of the day, meaning by the time I'd come back to attempting this bullshit, I'd fully calmed down. Phase 1 was a breeze at this point, and by some miracle, it only took me a handful of tries to get through the second phase. All that remained once again was this duel, and funnily enough, I was able to toast Ares on my first attempt, thus ending the most torturous experience to ever grace this channel. With our revenge exacted, we find ourselves on the same cliffside that we started on, and despite our efforts, Kratos never did get that hair transplant. Disappointed, Kratos looked to end the franchise before it even started, but the gods of Santa Monica had other plans, especially after having witnessed the unbelievable sales numbers of the first game. With the God of War annihilated, it seems it was only fair that we'd have to take his place, and as the game came to a close, Kratos made sure to farm as much aura as possible, despite having gotten his ass handed to him 134 times. This puts it up there as one of the hardest games to ever grace this channel, and while people have said that the number shown to us at the end of the credits in God mode linked to a Kratos voice message, I'm more inclined to believe it's a direct line to the nearest mental health clinic. Either way, I was relieved. I mean, there's no way it'd get any worse than this, right? Like its predecessor, God of War 2 attempts to prepare us for the fisting we're about to receive, as we're required to beat the game on another difficulty first before being able to attempt Titan mode. Now, as you can imagine, dying 134 times didn't quite sit right with Kratos, and despite Athena's attempts to stop him, Kratos knew deep down that he didn't deserve the title God of War. Upset, Kratos looked to finish what he couldn't at the start of God of War, as he once again dove face first towards the earth. Unfortunately for him, his limb extension surgery had gone terribly wrong, making it so he couldn't consciously control what size he'd be when landing. In the hopes of helping control this surgery, Athena looks to suck him dry. I mean, like suck his powers dry. In reality though, she'd accidentally transferred Kratos' power into a random ass crow who'd gone to take a dump on the Colossus statue, ultimately awakening it. Infuriated that he'd somehow ended up with some festering feces on his shoulder, the Colossus had no one but Kratos to blame, thus beginning this game's introductory cat and mouse chase. Now, despite losing our height advantage, we hadn't been completely drained of our powers. Concerningly however, we had been drained of our ability to throw human enemies about, meaning we had to rely on our overpowered magic to deal with this army of cannon fodder. Now, you'd think the massive Colossus throwing a temper tantrum outside would be causing us the most stress, but in reality, there was a far more anxiety-inducing change just around the corner. Wait, what? Why's my HP not full? Yeah. The sick fucks at Santa Monica saw that Ares boss fight in the original and thought to themselves, why don't we just make the entire playthrough of God of War 2 just as AIDS as that was? What this means is that health and magic chests only heal us for half our max totals. Enemies still deal 500% damage, Kratos now deals 75% damage, opening red orb chest feels like taking a power drill to the sack, and every single enemy is completely obsessed with us to the point where blinking equals death. Ironically enough, we get one final moment of solace with these classy women before getting fisted ourselves by this absolute unit. What I hadn't realized at this point was just how large this guy's dick was. I mean, how large his hitboxes were. Any attempt at rolling this guy's attacks soon became impractical as I looked to deal with them in the only manner I saw fit. So essentially, if you stand in this little corner here, he can't really hit you, and then you just charge up a triple triangle combo and done. Having witnessed the arse beating we've received, Zeus brings to our attention a Shark Tank offer. Although based on his conditions, I knew there was only one way this was going to end.
Drain your godly powers into the sword, Kratos.
Drain our powers.
Only then will you reach your full potential.
What could possibly go wrong with that? Unfortunately, our IQ competes with that of a sleep-deprived slugs, and after draining ourselves of our magic health and experience, we're able to dive deep into the Colossus's innards, where there were apparently even more enemies. Wait, what the fuck? Thankfully they're weak as shit, and after collecting our first Gorgon Eye, we're able to destroy the Colossus from the inside out. Concerningly though, we'd inhaled a metric fuckton of smoke, meaning we could barely limp our way towards the Blade of Olympus. Zeus, being the coward that he is, had waited for this exact moment, as he quite literally swoops in to seal our fate. That said, his damage output is downright pathetic. I mean, we were taking more damage from the cannon fodder at the start of the game, for God's sake. Alas, after 48 hours of this pathetic damage, we just said fuck it, and accepted our fate as we're dragged off to the underworld yet again. Unbeknownst to Zeus, however, but we've climbed our way out of the underworld before, and with the Titans backing us this time around, we were more than capable of doing it again. Wait, that was weird. I think I lagged there. Okay, what the fuck is going on here? I shit you not. If you try anything but grabbing down here, you're going to die insanely fast. By some miracle though, our grab attack somehow AoEs itself across multiple hands, and with them giving us HP, it just about gets us out of this hellhole with life to spare. We weren't the only ones fighting to survive though, as we touched bases with the only Spartan able to tank Zeus's attack.
My lord, I knew you could not be killed.
Fearing that he'd catch on to our death count, we sent him back to Sparta as we barrel rolled our way through countless griffins in the hopes of reaching the Sisters of Fate, who were said to have the ability to control time. Unfortunately, we're not able to make it there in one trip, as all the spinning had disorientated our Pegasus, who proceeded to fly straight into the clutches of Typhon, the titan sealed within this cavern. Now, for whatever reason, the game thought it would be a good idea to focus in on this brain-dead Pegasus, meaning the moment the camera flicked back to us...
Sisters of Fate.
Wait, what? This cavern once again introduces climbing enemies, although to everyone's surprise I'm sure, I'd finally learnt how to grab them. It was also around this point where I'd learnt just how aggressive enemies were in Titan mode, as I could barely get an attack off when surrounded by 3 or more enemies. Luckily for us, Minotaurs still dropped health orbs when stabbed in the mouth, although even these orb drops are affected by that decrease, meaning we don't heal nearly as much in this game when compared to God of War 1. Eventually we stumble across a man who's suffering from the second worst torture tactic possible. Alright, that's enough, buddy. Things could always be worse. I mean, you could be watching one of my videos. With his cries for help having pierced our ears, we fight our way back into the caverns, making sure to collect every red orb chest that we can. Along the way, we play a little game of cat and mouse with Typhon, dodging his putrid breath while grabbing every harpy in sight. This ultimately leads to us stabbing Typhon in the eye, and then somehow pulling a bow straight out of it. We then use this very bow to blind Typhon's other eye. Fuck me, we're actual scumbags. Either way, with bow in hand, we return to Prometheus where we end his suffering, gaining a new power in the process. With our newfound power, we can tickle Typhon's fingertips and continue our journey across the galaxy. Along the way, our Pegasus gets absolutely bodied as we're forced to fight off against this, thing. And despite defeating it, Kratos thought it would be a good idea to obliterate the only remaining method of flying anywhere, choosing rather to dive bomb his way face first into the Temple of Lachesis. Upon arrival, we're warmly greeted by the local residents, learn of Kronos' strange incestual desire to eat his own children, and get our first health upgrade. Now, all things considered, this temple wasn't too bad. One crucial factor that I hadn't realized yet was just how overpowered collision damage was on Titan mode. See, the 500% damage increase of enemies doesn't just apply to Kratos, it also applies to other enemies as well. This means that any time an enemy collides with another, whether that's from throws or certain juggling moves, it deals an unbelievable amount of damage. This proved extremely useful when dealing with enemies like the Cerberus, who stupidly surrounded itself with an endless supply of ammunition. Before long, we'd come across Zeus's bitch boy. What I hadn't realized at the time, however, was just how tough this fight was going to be. Now, lore-wise, this fight should be a total mismatch. I mean, we've killed a literal god before, and Theseus knows this all too well, as he promptly fucks off halfway through the fight. Ignoring the fact that Kratos would have no problem reaching this area with his chain blades, we're now forced into using Typhon's Bane to slowly chip away at his HP. This wouldn't be such a huge problem if it didn't take 55 shots to take him down. To help put things into perspective, a full magic bar at this point can dish out about 25 hits, meaning we'd need more than 2 whole bars of magic to defeat him. Thankfully, Theseus is kind enough to spawn in waves of Minotaurs who once defeated drop us an abysmal amount of magic. Taking this into consideration, we'll need to defeat 5 whole waves of Minotaurs to get enough magic to defeat him. And trust me when I say that this was absolutely brutal. Whether I was getting whittled down from range or getting one hit by these icebergs. Yes, these fucking things one hit kill you. There was no telling how many times I died to this bastard. Because of the absolute shit show that were Red Orb chests, our financial situation couldn't be worse, as we'd barely managed to upgrade our Blades of Athena to level 2 by this point. We may as well have been hitting these Minotaurs with a feather, because they were taking about 18 business days to get down. With another dozen deaths to our name, I knew there had to be another way around this, and that's when I remembered something. Collision damage. Our blades might have been doing fuck all damage, but what if we could launch these Minotaurs into each other for 500% damage? Now that might just work. And while this was still easier said than done, this strategy combined with some patience and keeping the Minotaurs at range worked absolute wonders, as I was finally able to beat this shit covered slime ball. You can only imagine just how satisfying these circle presses were. Yeah, you like that, you little bitch? Yeah, take it! You take that shit! Brutality aside, with the Horsekeeper's keys obtained, we were able to whip these Steeds of Time into action, granting us access to the Island of Creation. It's on this very island where we obtain the power to slow time, get fucked on by some more race, and play like absolute pussies when faced with the first Cyclopses. As we step foot into the Bog of the Forgotten, we are immediately ambushed by a figure who, contrary to this area's name, was someone we could never forget. This savage here was the very same barbarian who had handed us our first defeat as a Spartan captain. And with that in mind, I think it was about time we got some revenge. Jesus fucking Christ, I've never felt like the little bro more than this situation here. The Barbarian King fight has 4 different phases. The first 2 are simple enough. Dodge his horse charge while smacking him every now and then, and the second phase can be completed by spamming the grab button on all the souls he spawns. The third phase is by far the hardest though, as he takes a page out of the God's books and enlarges himself to the point where he takes up about half the screen at all times. His attacks not only gain insane range because of this, but the camera also just gives up at this point, making it extremely hard to gauge distance between us and his attacks. The saddest part is that during this phase, he only has 2 attack patterns. The first is a quick slash that you have to instantly roll to avoid, while the second is more of a delayed attack that you have to time to avoid. Because of this, I'd often roll immediately, only to be caught by his delayed attack over and over again. This paired with his ridiculous damage saw our death counter skyrocket. Upon his defeat, you just know we're pounding the fuck out of these QTE buttons and then taking his hammer for ourselves. The pain didn't stop there though, as we soon stumbled across the Temple of Uriel. Now don't let its ghastly appearance fool you, this place was far worse than it looked. Not only do you have Beyblading skeletons who nuke your health bar, there's also these Beast Lords who are so pathetic they won't even face you head on, instead vying to ride atop Cyclopses who stunlock you into oblivion. Grabbing enemies was still the piece de resistance, both in terms of our damage as well as using them to iframe our way through plenty of enemy damage. Our adventures ultimately led us to one of the saddest sights in the entire game though, a disabled Minotaur. Apparently this guy had been divorced by the love of his life, and having spent decades wallowing in depression, he'd lost the ability to use his legs. Unfortunately, he saw us as the sexy hunk that stole his lover away from him, and in a fit of rage, he continuously spun around in the hopes of flattening us. Sadly, he blocked our path forward, and while it broke my heart having to do this, we had to put him out of his misery. I can't say the same sympathy was extended to this next beast though. Now, comparatively, this Dark Cerberus fight is fairly easy, as we're able to block each and every attack it spews out. Honestly, the only reason I died at all during this fight was because I'd spammed the attack button straight after blocking, which in turn had us spinning around like a constipated ballerina. We did end up shoving our hand so far down his throat that we quite literally could feel the shit he put us through, and in return we were rewarded with the Golden Fleece. This here might just be the best item in the entire game, as we're able to use it to deflect whole ass Goron blasts back at them. With Fleece in hand, we're able to collect a few hidden chests by deflecting these Goron beams back at the walls. It also grants us the ability to parry enemy attacks, and in turn deal some of our own damage if timed properly. All things considered, I was feeling pretty good at this point in the game. The Golden Fleece was working wonders, and I'd also come to understand just how important launching and juggling enemies were. Even the boss fight against Uriel was a breeze, as I quickly learned that if you just stood to the side of her when she climbed these poles, you could not only block all of her attacks, but also wail on her with the Barbarian Hammer. Look, you're just going to have to trust me on this one. I honestly can't be fucked spending literal hours keyframing a sensor bar because this dumb bitch refuses to cover up her boobs. Just know that we end the fight by ripping her head off, and that her power will become instrumental later on into the game. For now though, we swum our way around another puzzle, partook in our daily dose of animal cruelty, and met up with yet another disabled Minotaur. Now believe it or not, but this guy was apparently the sexy hunk that had stolen the last Minotaur's wife, only for the exact same thing to happen to him. Unlike the poor fellow he humiliated, this guy came with his own company in the form of these dive-bombing harpies. To deal with these suckers, I just ran back to this mineshaft area, and with his deteriorating eyesight, the Minotaur wasn't able to see this far ahead. This caused him to shell up again, meaning we could sneak back in for a few more cheeky hits, ultimately ending his misery as well. Following this, we used these skeletons for a quick round of bowling before making our way back to the Destiny's Atrium. Before anything else though, I made sure to backtrack to the Bog of the Forgotten, as it contains the first of 3 unique chests. This here is the Experience chest, which gives us an abundance of red orbs. The amount differs based on the difficulty, so in reality, it's really not that much in Titan mode. Even so, it was barely enough to get our Athena's blades up to level 4, and with our new Golden Fleece, we're then able to deflect this fireball back at the wall, revealing a pathway to Australia. Now as much as I love Australia, the problem here is that this place was infested with boomerang throwing raids that will never stop attacking you. When it comes to the difficulty in these games, this aggression was the real game changer to me. While God mode in God of War 1 was challenging, it felt manageable most of the time. It may have had some truly AIDS sections, but for the most part, it wasn't unbearable. Here though, I was fighting for my goddamn life every single encounter. It didn't matter if it was a group of regular enemies or a big boss fight, I was getting my ass handed to me constantly. Add some brain dead platforming mistakes, and it's no wonder my death count had already doubled my IQ. With that in mind, you can imagine my surprise when I stumbled across a goofball with an even lower IQ than myself. This here is Perseus, the undisputed champion of Marco Polo, and if you don't believe me, have a listen.
I'm right here. Over here. I'm over here now.
I mean, what kind of dumbass lets his opponent know where he is while he's invisible? This tomfoolery paired with his piss poor damage resulted in a ruthless beatdown. That wasn't quite the end of him however, as following his passing we're able to find these 3 separate stars which when done paint out his final words in the sky, none of which I cared about at all. In all honesty, the only reason I did any of this was for the red orbs we got as a reward. Either way, using Perseus' shield we're able to dispel the barrier that was blocking our path to becoming the next big Hollywood star. Apparently our stunts were so awe-inspiring that it made the rest of the cast extremely jealous, to the point where they thought getting rid of us would benefit their careers in the long run. Unfortunately for them though, we do all of our stunts ourselves, meaning we made short work of these absolute frauds. This included Icarus, who despite insisting he was the only one capable of reaching the Sisters of Fate, did everything but attempt to reach them. His inability to stop yapping gave us the perfect opportunity to yoink his wings, and despite having fallen into the Great Chasm, we were more determined than ever to rewrite our history with the gods. To do that though, we'd have to find a way off this dude's nose. And because we are an honourable Spartan that's never once done any wrong, I made sure to clear out the other pests infesting our friend's, what is this, like his butthole? Or regardless, as we travelled deeper we came across a familiar looking entity. Now despite looking like the other 2 disabled Minotaurs, this guy was the true homewrecker. See, this one can actually move, and it was for that very reason that the previous Minotaur's lovers had left them. Wanting nothing more than to get revenge for them, I made sure to keep my distance before going in for the kill. With the souls of the previous Minotaurs put to rest, we glided our way down to the platform of misery, where we were shit on over and over again. I don't know who it was, but it takes a real sadist to pair a set of Hades legionnaires with an army of dive-bombing harpies. Like what in the fuck were they thinking? It's one of those fights where you just have no idea what the fuck is going on most of the time. Alas, having somehow passed that goddamn platform, we begin the arduous climb up Atlas's butt cheeks, where we're taken out by some loose diarrhea. Upon reaching the cusp of his cheeks, we speak with Atlas, who recounts the Titans' pathetic fall from grace as they're clapped by the gods of Olympus. This fight was so one-sided that Zeus spent most of it aura farming, while the rest of the gods did all the hard work. Being the narcissist that he is, however, he made sure he was the one to deal the final blow, as he used the Sword of Olympus to recreate the extinction event that wiped out the dinosaurs. As thanks for listening to that snooze fest, Atlas bestows upon us the ability to create magnitude 5 earthquakes with our bare hands. With his help, we're also able to cross the Great Chasm before arriving at the Palace of the Fates. This is the point where I'd say the game takes it to a whole new level in terms of difficulty. Whether I was getting flattened by beast lords or stun-locked and railed inside this spiked room, it had become painfully obvious just how unforgiving every single encounter had become. This game even has its own variant of the cancerous clone battle from the first game, where we're tasked with protecting a lousy translator as an endless stream of summoners and enemies pile onto him. This translator section is often considered one of the toughest sections in the entire game, but there are setups that we can use to guarantee that we make it to the final wave. It's just a shame that the final wave is by far the toughest out of the whole bunch. That said, I found abusing Kronos' rage to be extremely effective, as we're able to stun-lock multiple enemies at once, leading to us being able to pick off these summoners pretty early on. The rest saw us cleaning up these stragglers, although we do have to be careful not to throw any of these enemies into the translator, as he does take that 500% damage from collisions. By some miracle though, I had passed this section while only dying twice, meaning we could finally get this lazy bum to read out the most sacred of texts. We go from one roadblock to another, this time in the form of a few Cerberus breeders. The breeders themselves aren't too bad, as they're well and truly focused on shitting out their babies. The concern, however, is that these babies immediately hit puberty, and if left unchecked, they'll grow into their own Cerberus breeder before long. And once there's more than 2 of these things, I mean, it's just time to put the fries in the bag.
Okay, we are cooked.
I know I said most people hate that translator section from before, but if I'm being honest, this goddamn room was far tougher to get through. Yes, you can throw the little babies around for collision damage, but the way you throw them is extremely awkward, and I wasn't even sure if I was hitting them half the time.
What are you aiming at?
Not only that, but the moment you deal with 2 of the 3 Cerberus breeders, the game spawns in 2 Juggernauts who are extremely tanky and have an incredibly annoying charge attack. Theseus and the Barbarian King were rough in their own right, but this was the kind of roadblock where I honestly wondered if I'd ever be able to complete it. I mean, I had left an imprint of my palm on my forehead with how long I spent thinking about strategies, and the fact I didn't have enough orbs to upgrade Kronos' Rage really made things seem dire. But that's when I realized something. Sure, I may not have had enough to upgrade Kronos' Rage, but there was another magical power which I had barely touched up to this point, and little did I know just how effective this power would be. And just like that, the 3 breeders were taken care of, meaning I could take my time dealing with the Juggernauts who were simple enough on their own. I think it goes without saying, but after conquering that clusterfuck of a room, I had gained some much needed confidence, which only grew as I picked up our final health upgrade. The same unfortunately couldn't be said for everyone, as the very next person we met opted to throw themselves off the nearest cliff. Unbothered, we forced him to apologise before playing Duck Duck Goose with a few Cyclopses, only to then go and get crushed by the world's shittiest elevator. This was another one of those sections that I would never have considered hard had I not played through it on Titan difficulty. These skeletons are just so fucking annoying, and the constant need to pull away from these spikes made it all the more frustrating when I had to go and deal with these absolute scumbags. Again, the only method I found around this was leveling our Barbarian Hammer to level 2, which dealt just enough damage to kill these scrawny fuckers in 2 hits. The following areas in comparison were fairly tame, and we even managed to pick up our final magic upgrade here. Before long, we'd awoken the Phoenix as well as this silhouette of a man who couldn't help but attack us out of fear. I'm not really sure if I'd consider this a boss fight, as this guy just spams the exact same attack patterns over and over again, all of which can be parried quite easily. Upon his defeat, we learned that this is the same Spartan that we'd ordered back to Sparta, and during his dying breaths, he fills us in on Zeus's cheap invasion of Sparta and how he had left it in ruins. Kratos was so tilted at this revelation that his rage compilation had somehow managed to awaken the ancient kraken of, wait, where'd this fucking thing even come from? Regardless, Kratos was so blinded by rage that he hadn't even noticed that he was set to become the latest cast member in some tentacle hentai. That was a step too far for even Santa Monica though, and after some plot armor, we're granted a massive upgrade to the Rage of the Titans, an upgrade that we immediately abused to send this kraken to the afterlife. With our butthole's virginity still intact, we tame Moltres, who in turn delivers us to the inner chambers of the Temple of the Fates. It's here where we first meet with Lachesis, who thought it was some kind of fashion statement to only cover one boob. Like, for fuck's sake, man, why do I gotta censor everything in this game? Ignoring how annoying censoring this fight was going to be, it's actually a relatively challenging fight on Titan difficulty. Like Ares, it took me a good few attempts to learn her attack patterns, as well as the timings on her ranged attacks. The hardest part in my opinion though is her second phase, particularly when we're forced to dodge her attacks by swinging between these pillars. I mean, most of the time I just die while trying to hit her up in the air, but apart from that, she wasn't too unbearable. Her sister Atropos being even easier was definitely a welcome surprise. She may have triggered our PTSD.
No, God!
But in terms of her lethality, we're more likely to pass away from boredom than anything else. The fight essentially has us dealing with cannon fodder as we wait to deflect her attacks. Occasionally she'll come down to tinker with the blade we're standing on, unaware of the fact that we can now pummel her with our own simps. Realizing they stood no chance in one-on-one encounters, the two sisters looked to team up, which all things considered seemed to be the smart play. This phase of the fight is fairly interesting, as Lachesis uses these same few moves over and over. The main annoyance is Atropos though, as she constantly shoots projectile out of these mirrors. She serves as more of a distraction in this regard, as the moment you turn your focus to her, you're getting absolutely fucked by Lachesis, who does significant damage with her attacks. At some point, I just got sick of dying, so I just used the foolproof strategy of spamming magic to finally deal with these toxic sisters. This opened up the pathway to the biggest hurdle in the entire game, and maybe even the entire series.
Brother, what's that?
How anyone is supposed to move forward knowing that's what they'll have to look at is beyond me. Joking aside, the true horror is contained within the hallway to Klothos' loom chamber, and fuck me, is this hallway the true stuff of nightmares. This hallway contains multiple waves of incredibly tough enemies, and with no checkpoints and limited health and magic chests, it was by far the toughest segment in the entire game. Whether I was getting clobbered by juggernauts or straight up fucked in a corner by a million enemies, this was straight up torture. It felt like I had tried every strategy possible, from throwing enemies to grouping them behind barriers and abusing Uriel's gaze to turn them into stone. Nothing seemed to work, and I once again questioned if I was able to pull this shit off. But if there's one thing that's never let me down, it's my massive ego. And as corny as that shit sounds, it truly was the difference maker, as I was able to conquer Klothos' hallway after 2 hours of attempts. 2 fucking hours of attempts of this shit. Are you fucking kidding me? For anyone that wants to attempt this shit, and look, I wouldn't recommend it personally. I think it's I'm depressed. I'm gonna say it, like it made me depressed. Like it makes you think things. But if you're a closeted masochist and you're stuck at this point, let me quickly go over the strategy I used, which honestly I think can be fairly consistent. Wave 1, you want to run to the back barrier, block this guy's attack if it looks like he'll hit you, and then charge up a Gorgon Blast to stone the 2 Juggernauts. Take them out and the rest is easy cleanup. Wave 2 is easy, just Chronos Rage and throw the enemies into each other. Wave 3 is also easy, as you can block every single attack here. You mainly just want to wait out the Gorgon's gaze attacks, as you're able to deflect these beams and then petrify everything around you. Just do this over and over again until everything is dead. Wave 4 is another easy one, just stun and throw again. Wave 5 is probably the toughest of them all. What you'll want to do is slowly back away from the first satyr that spawns. Don't go too far, as you want to group these guys up behind the barrier that comes up. Wait for the other enemies to group up and then use another Gorgon Blast followed immediately by a Titan Storm to clear out these stoned enemies. Now depending on how much magic you have left, you'll want to use this combo a second time, although this might not always work out. Even in my successful attempt, I was left with 2 satyrs railing me in a corner, and you can probably tell from my HP, but this situation was looking extremely bleak. But I didn't give up, and after timing a roll and a parry, I was able to keep them at range and finish off the wave. You'll want to save the magic and health chest for after this wave if possible, as like I said, it's probably the toughest one out of the whole bunch. Wave 6 in comparison is a complete joke, just more stunning and throwing, and the final wave requires us to use another Gorgon Blast on the Cyclopses that drop down. After you deal with these first 2, the third one should be easy enough to deal with, as well as the rest of the fodder. If you really need to, you can pop Rage of the Gods to grab these 2 chests here, and then even use that to finish off the last Cyclops. Alas, after 2 hours of attempts and another 17 deaths, I had finally cleared out this hallway as I mentally prepared myself for the horrors hidden behind this door. Now, in comparison to what we had just conquered, Clotho is a rather tame boss. In all honesty, she's more of a puzzle boss than anything else, and despite her struggles, we were determined to give her a much needed haircut.
Let the rage of the Titans fuel your blades, Kratos.
With the sisters defeated, we plucked the threads of fate, allowing us to travel back in time and shoulder check Zeus. Considering we had just sent the King of the Gods flying with a simple shove, it became apparent to us that we could definitely take him. And Zeus, clearly mortified, instantly popped his enlargement pills, signifying the first of a multi-phased battle. Now, while he may have grown a few inches, the same couldn't be said about the range of his attacks, which remained hard locked on the center of the arena. This made standing to his left side extremely effective, as we AoE'd him down with the Chronos' Rage and the occasional back obliterator. His second phase is where things really take flight, as he starts shooting off lightning bolts at the speed of light. Learning the timing of this attack in particular is the main focus of this entire fight, as the moment you get this down, you'll be able to consistently milk him for health and magic, things you'll most likely need considering how damaging most of his attacks are should you get hit. All things considered though, this fight isn't particularly hard. It took us a few attempts to learn how to avoid his attacks, but after that, we just simply cooked his ass. Running out of options, Zeus once again pops his enlargement pills, resetting the fight back to the first phase, and realizing that he had booked in a hair transplant appointment, Kratos knew he didn't have time to waste here, and instead chose to surrender himself to Zeus.
Just beginning.
Alas, we weren't able to finish the job this time around, as the potential sales figures from a third God of War game outweighed Kratos' desire for revenge in this moment. While it is somewhat sad, Athena had to take the L in the situation, giving Zeus enough time to return to Olympus. Unbeknownst to him and the rest of the gods, however, we'd plucked another melody on the Threads of Fate, and somehow used that to bring the Titans back to this time period. What? The game then ends off with one of the most chilling lines in the franchise's history.
Zeus, your son has returned! I bring the destruction of Olympus!
Thus ends our Titan mode journey, and boy what a satisfying journey it was. That said, it definitely wasn't a tranquil one, as we died 173 times during it. I also got a Spartan rank, which, God, I mean, it just sounds shit, doesn't it? Either way, with the amount of hype generated from that ending, I thought it best that we end this video by ignoring all of that shit and instead going back to the past in Chains of Olympus. This game takes place a few years after the annihilation of Kratos' family, by which point he'd earned himself multiple Servant of the Month awards amongst the Olympian gods. Having fallen victim to Ares' scam regarding a hair transplant, Kratos had signed a new deal with the Olympian gods who had promised him one as a reward for completing 10 years of service to them. Not wanting to squander this opportunity, Kratos made his way to the city of Attica, where he was tasked with obliterating the invading Persian army. We may not be the god of war just yet, but our experience as a Spartan captain shone through as we single-handedly bodied the entirety of the army. You can tell this game's a prequel, as it's one of the few where we start off fighting against a human threat.
2 seconds later. 2 seconds later.
Bro, what is going on? Now awkwardly, this Basilisk gave us flash forwards of a certain other boss. In a sense, this first encounter mirrors our battle against the Hydra, which technically hasn't happened yet. Confusing timeline jargon aside, we're able to deal with this beast in a similar fashion by blocking his chomp attacks and dodging his fireballs. Having left him with a massive headache, he clears the way to the shorelines of Attica, where we dodge incoming cannon fire as we move this battering ram into place. Apparently, the only prerequisite to joining the Persian army was to be a complete pussy, as the moment you grab any one of them, the rest completely shit themselves to the point where they'll drop aggro completely and just watch as you rip their childhood friends apart. This made these opening beach sections extremely peaceful. Well, if you ignore the carnage that we're inflicting on these poor soldiers, that is. Our obliteration of the Persian army eventually led to the Persian king himself, and I can't be the only one who thought this guy looked like the perfect representation of a fictitious dwarf, despite not being one. On that note, I think a dwarf would have given us more trouble than this fool, as he seems incapable of doing anything but slowly walking around in the background. I mean, how the fuck is this a boss fight?
What are you doing? What are you doing?
Nothing. Me? Just hanging around.
Once you've clapped every other Persian's cheeks, he does get a bit more aggressive, but even then, he just spams the same slow as fire strike that's easy enough to roll away from. As if that wasn't embarrassing enough, we end up blitzing his face with his own treasures before taking both his magical power and his women for ourselves. Apparently even his own army didn't respect him, as following his death, they actually upped their pressure alongside the Basilisk to continue their siege on the city of Attica. It's almost like they thought their chances had gotten better now that he was gone. On our journey to hunt down the Basilisk, we come face to face with our second Cyclops, who has absolutely no chance of catching us considering how much space we've been given in this arena. From here, we grab another Gorgon Eye, farm a bunch of Persian warriors for red orbs, and watch in disbelief as these dumbass archers ricochet their own arrows into their buttholes. With how things were going, I wouldn't blame you for thinking we were playing on the easiest difficulty. Granted, we were still getting fuck all red orbs from these chests. Our financial situation was so dire in fact that we hadn't even been able to level our Blades of Chaos to level 2 by the time we'd come across the Basilisk. That said, we were able to level them halfway through the fight, which awkwardly enough got us killed about 5 seconds later. Oh, I'm fucking dead. Oh, this attack sucks, man! Safe to say, I chose to stick with the level 1 blades on my second attempt, as that way I could at least guarantee that I wouldn't be spinning around like a goddamn Beyblade. Outside of that though, this boss is a complete joke. His chomps can be blocked and his fiery breath can be jumped over once again. What I will say is that the rotating quick time events will most likely leave your palm skinless with how fast you have to rotate them. Skin or not though, we end up making the Basilisk bite its own cheek, which was so painful that the Basilisk just up and died. Frustrated with how easy that fight was, Kratos had some words for the gods residing up in Olympus.
Is this all you would have me do? Is there nothing else?
You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
Okay.
Annoyed with Kratos' bitching, the gods took a fat dump in response, which just so happened to take out the sun on its way. Having never witnessed anything like it, Kratos knew he had to check out this marvelous dookie, and for the next 3 days, he used his superhuman sense of smell to guide him towards his goal. Upon our arrival, however, it became clear that this was no Olympian feat, instead being a trap laid by Morpheus, who was currently on vacation from the Matrix. Helios, the god of sun, had mysteriously been kidnapped, giving Morpheus the perfect opportunity to test out his new radioactive sleep bomb. This had not only put a large majority of the gods to sleep, but it had also infected the local residents, turning them into armored sword-wielding shades. Thankfully, the fact that they remained humanoid in shape made it just as easy to juggle them, and while they seemed dead inside, the fact they still shat their pants the moment you grabbed their bodies proved there was still a chance at restoring the world back to its peaceful self. To do this, we'd have to fight our way through Morpheus's forces, which included the usual suspects, except this time they had a slightly greyish tint.
Well, duh.
The Morpheus beast in particular was a welcome surprise, as I'd always wanted to experience what it felt like to get my head ripped off by a crazed beast.
Help me!
What isn't obvious from this clip, however, is how dogshit you have to be to ever actually let this happen, as we're able to block every single attack this beast throws out. Ignoring my dogshit plays, we make our way towards the Temple of Helios, where it became rather apparent that Helios was indeed MIA. With the world slowly falling into an eternal slumber, Athena tasks us with finding Helios, as his light was said to be so bright that no one could possibly sleep through it. The most alarming thing about this whole situation, however, was the fact that Santa Monica had somehow made an even more AIDS variant of the satyrs. Ranged enemies are already bad enough, but these motherfuckers don't just stop at throwing bombs. Their bombs leave a fiery patch that takes up about 39.2% of the screen. This becomes even more annoying when they're paired with melee-based enemies, as we're constantly forced to dodge out of our own combos. Fortunately, the devs at Santa Monica had regretted reducing the health and magic drops on Titan mode in God of War 2, as they reverted it back to normal in this game.
Am I a joke to you?
Santa Monica is truly made up of pure sadists. In some vain attempt at retaliation, I made sure to destroy every statue erected by these sadistic developers before hopping onto yet another death trap disguised as an elevator. For security reasons, every elevator in the Temple of Helios had apparently been equipped with an endless stream of fire guards, who we are not able to block at this stage in the game. The good news is that most of them were deployed while on their lunch break, meaning we're likely to get some health back should we slice through their abdomen. Don't ask me why it works like that, it just does. The elevator eventually drops us off at the throne of Helios, which we immediately obliterate in the hopes of snagging the Sun Shield. This shield, much like the Golden Fleece in God of War 2, allows us to deflect nuclear missiles, meaning these fire guards had no chance of beating us now. That said, even if we had the ability to deflect the whole sun, it'd mean fuck all if we couldn't even do some simple QuickTime events. Oh my god. Wait, I'm actually dog shit. I am so fucking shit. Oh my god. This death was also the catalyst where I realized how dogshit most of the checkpoints were in this game. Like, why do I have to spend 5 years of my life running up this one staircase just to get back to the same fight, only to die yet again and have to do it all over? Having clapped another set of Morpheus' sleeper agents, we step our way through one of Da Vinci's masterpieces, ultimately ending up at the base of Mount Rushmore. Here we steal Triton's lance, which grants us the ability to swim underwater. Although calling this swimming would be extremely generous. It's almost as if Kratos was holding in a turd with how slow he swam, and as they say, there's a time and place for everything. Busting to take a shit wasn't an ideal mindset to be in, especially considering we were about to face off against one of the toughest enemies in the entire game, the Minotaur. See, contrary to their smaller counterparts, the Minotaurs in this game are incredibly aggressive. Their attacks can't be blocked, and they'll use every chance possible to impale you with their horns. This death fortunately doubled as a toilet break, allowing us to come back into this fight fully refreshed. Having vanquished her soon-to-be boyfriend, we're immediately brought before Eos, the god of dawn. Yeah, sick. Because of course she's not wearing anything up top, for fuck's sake. She essentially parrots the same things as Athena, but there was one statement she made that I found downright offensive.
Save my brother, Kratos, and he will convince Zeus to release you and rid you of the horrors of your past.
Stop the cap.
You'd think after falling victim to Ares' scam, we wouldn't be so quick to trust another god. But considering Kratos was closer to the god of Copium than the god of war at this point, we reluctantly agreed to continue our quest of finding Helios. To help us with said quest, we obtain our second magic power as well as pick up our second magic upgrade. Now, considering the chest had some kind of vendetta against us on god mode, we looked to use our magic sparingly, which almost immediately cost us our lives as we were assaulted by the local wildlife. This paired with the occasional QuickTime fail resulted in an experience that could only be described as a colossal skill issue. Alas, after reigniting the final chariot, our ears were immediately assaulted by some god-awful flute playing. And while strange at first, it didn't take us long to realize that there was only one person in the entire universe that could make a flute sound like a dying rat.
Calliope, my daughter.
Determined to break that damn flute of hers, we deal with the rest of Morpheus' snooze fest of an army before mounting the chariots of epilepsy who carried us straight into the underworld. How we've managed to end up here in every single game needs to be studied. Ignoring the fact that this is technically our first visit to the underworld, we come across our first set of wall climbing enemies, and while they tend to be rather lethal, the enemies here must have been in a good mood as they couldn't stop dancing. The main concern about Hades was its lack of health chests, and while I did make a complaint to the Hades City Council, they informed us that it'd take a good few centuries before our suggestion would be implemented. This meant that for now, we'd have to fight our way through multiple waves of enemies with barely any health. As you can imagine, this situation wasn't great, especially when we're ambushed by 2 Cyclopses in a tiny ass arena. The ironic part, however, is that these Cyclopses were the least of our worries. See, the moment you kill one of them, we're immediately rushed by some hoplites. These guys will always charge attack you, which isn't a problem on its own. Where it becomes slightly AIDS, however, is when you're unable to see them charging because you're too busy dodging the massive Cyclops' smashes. Well, that's just AIDS, isn't it? Like, I couldn't even see him coming. My minuscule health bar wasn't doing me any favors here, as I died over and over again. In the end, I had to take my chances and grab this health chest mid-fight, as I couldn't risk dying in one hit for another 78 years. With how little this heals us though, it didn't make much of a difference in the long run. What did make a difference, however, was finding our final Gorgon eye, which was like a blessing from the gods, even though they were currently sleeping at this point. This eye gave us our final health upgrade, which also restored all the HP we had lost so far. With our newfound confidence, we pushed forward about 62 steps before we were once again humbled by these mace-wielding fuckers. Oh shit. Oh, okay. What? Oh, I'm getting fucking dunked on. It's become a running joke by this point, but my IQ seems to deteriorate with every video I make. And in this case, I didn't realize you could parry these guys' attacks. So there I was, for about 10 minutes, rolling around like a constipated caterpillar as I got my face rearranged over and over again. Thankfully, I'd saved up enough red orbs to max out Blades of Chaos, which didn't seem to mean much considering I was back to getting my ass blasted by these same Death Knights moments later. Look, I get that we're playing on God mode, but getting hit straight out of our own QuickTime events is just plain bullshit. Oh wait, what the fuck? I couldn't even move. With our life total mirroring the size of my friend downstairs, I quickly saved out of fear before ringing the bells of awakening. This called forth a fairy owned by Charon. Charon wasn't too happy we'd boarded without paying, and promptly told us to fuck back off. Unfortunately for him though, his threats were about as useful as his mask, which didn't cover his face whatsoever. Furious, Charon attacks us out of embarrassment, thus beginning the most one-sided boss fight to date. See, despite having barely a single hit point to our name, we're able to deal with Charon fairly easily. All of his attacks can be blocked, and his ranged attacks when parried give us a bit of health back. That said, we were never meant to win this fight, as we don't yet have the weapon required to break these pillars. Having been bodied on purpose, we're dropped into the mitochondria, which just so happens to be the powerhouse of Hades.
That's not entirely accurate.
Using its power, we're able to break our way out of this BDSM roleplay as we claim our final Phoenix Feather and magic upgrade. We may have maxed out our magic gauge, but losing to Charon came with its own challenges. For one, we'd once again been drained of most of our health, and despite decimating our BDSM cast members for extra health, the orb's nerfs from God mode were being felt more than ever. With such little HP, it was inevitable that we'd soon find ourselves getting railed in a corner. Twice. Things had gotten so dire that we'd resorted to cheese-killing enemies by standing outside of their roaming range. This extended to these archers who we simply abused from below. These scummy tactics couldn't be abused forever, however, as soon we were back to roll dodging a clusterfuck of cursed harpies. Leaving each battle with a minuscule amount of HP had become the new norm, meaning we'd have to abuse any potential advantages we could get while pressing forward. Having taken out another set of minotaurs, we eventually stumble across the elite king of this region, who's definitely seen better days. Being the disrespectful scumbag that we are, we push this king off the ledge before stealing his key. We then use that key to extend a bridge towards a much needed save point. The main point of attraction over here, however, is this statue of Zeus. Now, I'm not sure if you can see it that well, but he's got a mighty powerful looking gauntlet on his hand. Only the chosen ones are allowed to wear this gauntlet, and based on our first few attempts, we definitely weren't the chosen ones. What we lack in skill though, we make up for by smashing our head against the wall until it breaks, and in this case, it only took another attempt or two before we got our hands on that majestic gauntlet. Sadly, we weren't the most experienced person when it came to fisting. Like anything though, the more we tried it, the more addictive it became, to the point where we were fisting everything from cursed harpies to beefy cyclopses. As we made our way through the rest of Asphodel, I made it a goal of mine to never perish again. What? I never said I achieved that goal. Either way, with a few more deaths donated to the counter, we spent the next 5 years crossing this chain before climbing our way out of Asphodel. Now at first, this area seemed rather unfamiliar, but within the next 37 seconds, I'd been reminded exactly where I was. Whoever thought it was a sweet idea to pair a bunch of Death Knights with these Weeping Harpies needs to be fired immediately. I mean, up until this point, I hadn't really gotten too tilted, but this arena? This shit was straight AIDS. The worst part though was that I had to climb the same damn cliff face over and over again. Like mate, I'm already a masochist for playing on this difficulty, so you might as well just spawn me straight into the torture chamber. Speaking of torture, we once again had to face off against Charon with limited health and magic. This wasn't a problem for the first half of the fight though, as again, Charon's attacks are incredibly easy to block and parry. This time however, we're able to use our gauntlet to smash these pillars, stopping his channeled attack in the process. It's here where he starts to vomit out some infectious cancer, which I couldn't seem to get out of once I'd been hit. Despite my best efforts at dodging this attack, I'd get caught in it again and again. Eventually, I just decided to stop being shit, and following the brutalization of his face, we sailed our way towards the Temple of Persephone, which when translated meant the Temple of Misery. The more rooms I entered in this palace, the deeper I fell into depression. Whether I was back to getting my head ripped off or swarmed by a group of virus-carrying harpies, I was just straight up not having a good time. The worst part, however, was that the developers had saved the worst room for last. Not only do we have to deal with 3 separate Minotaurs, there's also a bunch of dual-wielding satyrs in between them. The initial duo of Minotaurs are so aggressive and tanky that most of the time I just opted to spam magic, as I was able to hit both of them while providing us with precious iframes. That said, the amount of damage these guys output is absolutely brutal, as I died over and over again. By some miracle though, I had somehow got the last Minotaur into a particular attack pattern, making it far easier to dodge his attacks and take him out. Our triumph here led us to one final room with a Cyclops and a few Gorgons, however they were nothing in comparison to what we'd just conquered. Having dominated her temple with ease, we were rewarded with some stunning eye candy.
Smash.
Despite being lovely to look at, she comes with bad news, as she tells us that if we want to destroy our daughter's flute, we'll have to sacrifice our health, magic and orbs.
Oh shit, here we go again.
With the fate of the world resting on our shoulders, we agreed to her terms as we're milked dry by the great Deku tree. As we enter yet another of Da Vinci's beautiful pieces, we're blessed with the sight of our daughter, and better yet, she doesn't seem to have that horrid flute with her. As wholesome as this moment was, it soon became apparent just how annoying our daughter had become, most likely due to her having spent time with Persephone, whose pastimes included freeing the Titans in the hopes of destroying Olympus. The destruction of the gods would ultimately lead to us missing out on that hair transplant, and with this realization in mind, we pushed our daughter aside as we got back to our own personal hobby, snapping the necks of innocent civilians. The more innocents we killed, the quickly our power would return, and while there were a few hoplites running about, their death sounds didn't sound nearly as satisfying as this. Having fully recouped our testosterone, we looked to Persephone for some spicy action. This is not what I had in mind. All things considered, Persephone is not a complicated fight. Much like Lachesis, how well you do against her comes down to your parry timing. During her first phase, she only really has 2 attacks. The first of which sees her earthbending, which you can avoid by simply walking around it. Her other attack is a charge followed by some punches, which you can parry to iframe the following hits. In this sense, the moment you get the parry timings down, she becomes a complete joke. What I will say is that she does some incredibly high damage should she hit you. So, I mean, I'd advise not getting hit at all.
No shit.
The second phase begins with Atlas joining the fight, although this whole segment is done through QuickTime events, meaning it shouldn't be too hard to complete. Eventually we're spear tackled by Persephone back into the arena, thus beginning the final phase. Now, this phase is an interesting one, as it's quite easy to avoid all of her attacks. It revolves around deflecting her attacks back at her, with each time requiring more deflections in a row. Her other attacks are all fairly easy to dodge as I mentioned before, but considering you have to complete 4 whole rounds of tennis, it can wear you down after a while, which oftentimes leads to dumb mistakes. That said, during our next attempt, we'd started to blind her ass with our high beam lights, which were so bright that it caused her to implode from the inside out. With his mistress splattered across the underworld, Atlas had no choice but to carry the whole world on his shoulders, yet he still had the strength to predict one thing.
We will meet again, Spartan. The fates have deemed it. One day, you will regret what you have done here.
With that ominous warning weighing on our minds, we ride the chariot of epilepsy back to the surface where Helios's light would illuminate the world once again, thus ending another one of our side quests for the Olympians. And boy, was it a brutal one, as we perished a total of 36 times during it. With that said, I think it's about time we rank the game so far in terms of their God mode difficulties. I do want to reiterate that I have started playing through the other 3 games as of the time of this recording, so hopefully my next video will include all 6 Greek God of War games. I hope you can understand after watching that clusterfuck of a video that I just needed a break from the constant railing. Either way, we're not here to talk about my emotional damage, we're here to rank these games based on difficulty. To no one's surprise, I'm sure, Chains of Olympus takes the spot as the easiest God of War game to complete on God mode so far. For one, it's a much smaller game compared to the other 2, meaning the enemy variety and the overall number of fights suffered as a result. That said, there were a good few tough segments towards the end of the game, and the constant kick in the nuts whenever we opened a magic or health chest still remains a painful memory. Taking the spot in the middle is the original God of War, and let's not sugarcoat things, shall we? The only reason this game got such a high death count is because of the Ares fight. I wouldn't be surprised if that fight alone doubled my death count. That's just how hard of a fight he is. The rest of the game is challenging, don't get me wrong, but compared to that clone phase, god, that shit still gives me nightmares. But the winner of this first part is without a doubt God of War 2. From the very beginning, I could sense that this game was going to be a painful one. The nerfs to health and magic drops were one thing, but the fact that there were so many bosses, all of which who were relatively tough, made it feel like I was constantly smashing my head against the wall trying to get past them. This paired with the tougher regular enemies truly made for an experience that I most likely will never forget. And that goddamn Clotho hallway, my god, that's gotta be up there with one of the most time-consuming obstacles I've ever encountered in a game. Anyway, that's how my rankings came out after a few dozen hours of getting fisted. If you enjoyed this video, do please leave a like, and if you're insane, then you might as well subscribe as well. Hoping to see you all in the next one, where we'll finally complete our raid on Olympus, and hopefully destroy it all together.